With this whole debacle with Elon Musk and people saying this and that, and you taking this side and you taking that side, and I even saw people calling people gamma males and beta males and alpha males, it really got me thinking, if we need to resolve this, what kind of melee do you have or any of these guys have? What are their modifiers? Now, I don't condone any violence. This is all for fun. This is all for play. But let's get to it. Today on RPG Boons, we're going to ask all those YouTubers out there, are you ready to rumble? First, let's talk about melee. Now, unless you're somebody like Joe Rogan or one of those MMA guys, you're going to use strength for your melee attacks. And since we want to keep it real and keep it OG, we're going to go straight with unarmed strikes only. Now, in Dungeons and Dragons, what is strength? It shows us it measures your physical power. So how can we calculate your physical power? Let's take a look at strength, looking at lift and carrying capacity. Now, I really want us just to focus on this push, drag, and lift. You can see here that your lift is 30 times your strength. And when you're lifting that, you can only move 5 feet. So that now you can imagine you're lifting something super heavy, something like doing a deadlift. If you don't know what a deadlift is, that would make sense to me, that you can do a deadlift, and when you're deadlifting, you can maybe only move 5 feet at a time. So this gives us a hint of how we can calculate our D&D strength using a real-world measure of strength, the deadlift. Now, we know in Dungeons & Dragons that the commoner has a strength of 10, right? But what does the commoner have in our world? Who is the commoner amongst us, and where do we stand? Do you ever ask that question? Now, in Dungeons and Dragons, the average normal human has a strength of a 10 or 11. So let's see if we can calculate that out. Now, based on that push, drag, or lift, we can calculate our deadlift, right? 10 obviously is going to give us a 300, and 11 is going to give us 330. Now, how do those numbers fare in the real world? Now, if we do a couple of Google searches, we might be able to find kind of a number where the average person's strength lies. So what we're looking at here is, in bold here, an untrained male can lift 50 kilograms, that's 40 to 70 pounds, squat and bench press, or 70 to 120 pounds in deadlifts. Now we know based on the lift, it's 30 times your strength. So basically all we have to do is divide that number by 30. Instead of 120, divide that by 30, it says 4. 4 seems awfully low, so maybe this is not exactly correct. But how can we figure out what the actual commoner strength is? Let's do a little more digging. So if we go here to livestrong.com, it gives us a list of body weights. We can see that 125 is listed there. Okay, so that's cool. But that says that's for somebody who's about 150 pounds. Okay, but then it lists a bunch of other different weights for people and the ability for untrained, novice, and intermediate people in terms of training to be able to lift this amount of weight. What is the average weight of a normal man in the United States? Now we can actually kind of find that. If we look up and we check a few resources, they all come out to be about 200 pounds. So now let's go back to that chart. If you go back to that chart, we can see that 200 pounds is about 198. So we can now roughly calculate that deadlift weight and then use that D&D calculation that we just saw. And if we do that, we can see that for somebody who's about 200 pounds, looking at the untrained versus novice versus intermediate, we divide 155 by 30, 290 by 30, 355 by 30. What do we get? We get 5.1, 9.6, and 11.8. But let's just round those to the nearest whole number. So we're going to get 5, 10, and 11.3. So it really tells us if the average man is 200 pounds, and according to Dungeons and Dragons, a 10 strength is about 300 pounds. That tells us that we can use actually this chart to calculate what the average man's strength is and how that compares to Dungeons and Dragons. We have to look at the body weight of 198 and look at the novice trained person, and that's going to give us basically a strength of about 10. So at least now we know how to calculate that average strength. But not all of us do deadlifts. So what other metric can we use? Well, here it lists squat, and bench press. And one thing a lot of people know is bench press. How much can you bench press? How many times have you heard that? On Fitness Volt, they show you how much you can squat or bench press at 40 to 70 pounds for an untrained male. And they also show you how much the deadlift is, which is 70 to 120 pounds. So if we simply divide this bench press number by the deadlift number, it's going to give us a multiplication factor. We can then use that multiplication factor, times it by our deadlift number, and that's going to give us a bench press number. And so what we're looking at here is that the 290-pound person with that multiplication factor, it's going to give us 165. Now, how accurate is this RPG Boons breast press calculation factor of 0.57? Here we got 165. But interestingly enough, we got that 0.57 using another resource and using this calculation. But if we look at livestrong.com and look at another chart that they have within their website, we can now look at a bench press standards by body weight. And if you look at that 200, look at that novice trained, it's 175. And we can see we've come pretty close to that 175 at 165.3. So the calculation factor is actually pretty good. So now based on that, we can calculate your actual strength. By simply dividing your bench press by 0.57, it's going to give you a deadlift number. Then you can take that deadlift number, divide it by 30, and that's going to give you an estimate on your strength. Now here's a quick reference sheet. You can basically see your strength in D&D terms on the left. Now that we know that deadlift and D&D lift are essentially the same, we can use that to directly calculate your D&D strength. You can look at your bench press on the right and then basically see what your D&D strength would be. Now we can look at those ability score modifiers. Now we can have that celebrity deathmatch, YouTuber style. And if they look at all these different stats here, they can identify what their ability modifier might be. Now, what would Gary Gygax do if he walked in on us and we were all fighting like this? Now, I believe it was the great Gary Gygax who said, "Do whatever you want with the game. That's what the hell I do." And that's it, everybody. This is supposed to be fun. It's a joke, but I really just wanted to show you how you can maybe potentially calculate your strength for Dungeons and Dragons and show the kind of ability modifiers you have when you want to get into that melee combat. I don't recommend any type of violence, and I only believe in
safeguard the helpless. That is your oath. And that is so you remember it.
This is RPG Boons, where we talk about everything RPG and how everything is RP. If you like the cut of my gibberish, hit those buttons. Leave a comment. I'll get back to you. Until then, see you next time.